1:30 hours, March 2nd, 1945, over the German border. The cockpit of the P-61 Black Widow is a tomb of frozen glass. First Lieutenant Hermann Ernst stares into a void that has no horizon. He is 26 years old and he is flying through a nightmare. Behind him, the rhythmic green pulse of the radar scope flickers. Lieutenant Edward Kopsel watches the electronic sweep with predatory focus. The air is thin, the engines hum a low, vibrating growl of power. They are hunting a ghost contact that refuses to show itself. Both men carry the weight of those who didn't make it. Ernst had walked away from a crash that killed his entire crew. Kopsel was the lone survivor of a separate, terrifying mid-air disaster. His two men marked by death, now bonded by the machinery of war. They had given their aircraft a name that was a grim confession. Painted in white on the matte black nose was borrowed time. It wasn't a joke or a boast. It was their absolute reality. In the math of 1944 night fighting, they were already dead men. By day, the sky belonged to the P-51 Mustangs and the bombers. The Americans ruled the light, but the darkness was a different world. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the Luftwaffe emerged. German bombers slipped through the shadows to strike at Allied camps. The Army Air Forces needed a weapon that could see in the dark. The Northrop P-61 Black Widow was the brutal, heavy metal answer. It was the first American plane built specifically for the night. A 13-ton monster of twin booms and 4 lethal 20mm cannons. But the Black Widow carried a secret the official reports hid. The pilots flying this massive machine were essentially flying blind. The advanced SCR-720 radar sat in the nose, a 400-pound brain, but the pilot couldn't see the screen. Only the operator could. This created a tension that most fighter pilots absolutely despised. They were trained to use their eyes, to dogfight, to see the enemy.
Ow.
They had to surrender their senses to a man in the back. They had to fly on numbers and faith while the void swallowed them. The 422nd Night Fighter Squadron arrived in England in early 1944. They were pioneers in a brand new, terrifying way to wage war. Before they ever saw a German, the darkness began to take them. Training accidents claimed crews who vanished into the English Channel. Mechanical failures turned the Black Widow into a 30-ton brick. Ernst and Kopsel joined the unit as the losses were mounting. They didn't look for friends. They looked for someone who survived. In the 422nd, surviving once was skill, but surviving twice was fate. The airfield at Floren, Belgium, was their base of operations. A former Luftwaffe strip, it was still scarred by Allied bomb craters. The ground crews worked in the mud, fighting the winter cold. Every takeoff into the black fog felt like a roll of the dice. Ernst and Kopsel developed a relationship built on total silence. Kopsel would call out the vectors with a calm, mechanical precision. Ernst would bank the heavy fighter without ever asking why. In the dark at 300 miles per hour, doubt was a death sentence. July 16, 1944, provided their first real taste of the hunt. The Germans had launched the V-1 buzz bomb campaign against London. The pilotless missiles were fast, low-flying, and incredibly deadly. The Pi-61's radar was the only thing that could track them at night. Vector 080, range closing fast. Kopsel whispered over the horn. Ernst pushed the throttles, the R2800 engines roaring in the dark. They dove from 5,000 feet, eyes searching for a flicker of light. Then they saw it. The orange tongue of the V-1's pulsed engine. Ernst squeezed the trigger, and the 4 belly cannons barked. The V-1 exploded in a sphere of white fire that blinded the crew. It was the first P-61 victory in the entire European theater, borrowed. Time had proven that the night now had a new master, but hunting a mindless drone was nothing like fighting a pilot. The war shifted after D-Day, moving deep into the heart of France. The 422nd moved to Maupartus, near the front lines of the advance. At night, they could hear the distant rumble of the heavy artillery. German intruders were attacking supply columns moving to the front. The Luftwaffe pilots were desperate, skilled, and very dangerous. They used the terrain of France to hide from the Allied radar net. Ernst and Kopsel spent hours chasing shadows that never materialized. Identification was the most stressful part of the entire mission. The sky was crowded with returning Allied bombers and transport planes. One mistake meant shooting down your own brothers in arms. Regulations demanded visual confirmation before pulling the trigger. In mid-August, they picked up a contact moving west at 8,000 feet. Kopsel locked the radar at 4 miles and guided Ernst in. Range 600 yards, 500, 400. The count echoed in Ernst's ears. A silhouette emerged against the stars, twin engines and twin tails. It was a Heinkel He-111 bomber returning from a nuisance raid. Ernst fired a 2-second burst into the bomber's left engine. The aircraft rolled into a ball of flame and dove into a field. It was their first manned kill, but the war was getting harder. The P-61 was a technological marvel, but it was incredibly temperamental. The radar systems often failed just as the target was in range. Hydraulic leaks and electrical shorts were constant daily battles. Many crews spent their borrowed time just trying to stay airborne. By September, the squadron had moved again, this time to Belgium. The mission count was high, but the kill count was agonizingly slow. The Germans were becoming experts at avoiding the Pi-61's patrol sectors. The pilots grew frustrated, feeling like they were hunting ghosts. Then came December 16, 1944, and the world went completely mad. The Germans launched the Watch on the Rhine. The Battle of the Bulge. 1,000 tanks and 1,000 planes struck through the Ardennes. Suddenly, the night sky over Belgium was crawling with targets. The 422nd found itself on the front lines of a massive offensive. Maintenance issues had reduced the squadron to only 4 flyable planes. Those 4 aircraft were tasked with defending an entire sector. Ernst and Kopsel were flying back-to-back missions until they bled. The weather turned into a frozen hell of snow and zero visibility. Ground crews used blowtorches to thaw out the frozen engine blocks. The pilots flew into storms that would have grounded a bird. But the Germans were coming, and someone had to stop them. On December 26th, Kopsel found a blip 30 miles out from base. "This one is ours, Hermann. Steer left. 10 degrees, he commanded. The P-61 closed the gap like a shark moving through dark water. The target was a Junkers Ru-88, burning navigation lights in error. Ernst didn't give the German pilot a chance to realize his mistake. The 20mm shells turned the bomber's wing into a shower of sparks. The Ru-88 vanished into the cloud layer and exploded on the deck. That night, the squadron claimed 5 kills in a single shift. The Bulge was the turning point for the crews of the 422nd. They were no longer just technicians. They were the elite of the air. But the intensity of the combat was taking a heavy psychological toll. One crew was lost to friendly fire. Another crashed upon landing. By mid-January, the German offensive began to stall and wither. The targets that had been so plentiful suddenly vanished again. The Luftwaffe was running out of fuel and experienced pilots. Ernst and Kopsel returned to the long, empty patrols of the void. Weeks passed without a single contact on the green radar scope. The silence of the night became more heavy than the sound of guns. The pilots began to wonder if their borrowed time was running out. Then March arrived, and the intelligence reports began to change. Something was happening deep inside the borders of Germany. The Luftwaffe was repositioning its remaining night fighter strength. The 422nd was ordered to fly aggressive patrols over the Rhine. On the evening of March 1st, Ernst and Kopsel received their orders. They lifted off at 22 o'clock hours into a sky of scattered gray clouds. The air was turbulent, tossing the heavy P-61 like a toy. Kopsel warmed up the radar, the tubes glowing in his compartment. "Let's see if the Germans want to play tonight," Ernst muttered. The first hour of the patrol was an exercise in sheer boredom. They flew a racetrack pattern, burning fuel and watching the dials. The ground control station, Nut House, was silent on the radio. Then at 23:15, a crackle came through the pilot's headset. "Borrowed time? We have a contact heading west at 4,000 feet. Ernst banked the plane, his eyes scanning the blackness for light. Copsel picked it up at 8 miles, a strong, steady return on the scope. They chased it for 12 minutes through a maze of ground clutter. The German pilot was clever, diving low to hide in the terrain. The radar signal became a mess of interference from the hills below. "He's gone, Herman. We can't track him down there," Copsel said. Frustrated, they climbed back to altitude to resume their watch. 15 minutes later, another vector came in from the ground station. This target was fast, pushing the limits of the Pi-61's top speed. Ernst pushed the throttles to the firewall, feeling the engine strain. But the target slowly pulled away, disappearing into another sector. 2 chases, 0 results, Ernst grumbled into the intercom. Suddenly, the darkness below them erupted in flashes of orange light. Friendly anti-aircraft gunners had mistaken them for a German raider. Tracer fire began to stitch the sky around the Black Widow's wings. "Brake left. Brake left," Copsel screamed as the shells exploded. Ernst rolled the 13-ton fighter onto its side, diving for safety. The P-61 shuddered as shrapnel tore through the aluminum skin. They were being hunted by their own men in the chaos of the night. They dove away from the barrage, drifting toward German territory. Ernst decided to stay there where the Allied guns couldn't reach them. "If they're coming, they have to cross this line," Ernst decided. They sat in the darkness, bleeding fuel, and waiting for a sign. At 1:10 on March 2nd, the radar scope finally came to life again. Nut House reported multiple tracks crossing the German border. The Luftwaffe was launching a final desperate surge into the night. "Contact 12 miles out. It's coming straight for us," Copsel said. This pilot wasn't running. He was confident in his own darkness. The range dropped. 4 miles, 2 miles, 1 mile, 800 yards. Ernst strained his eyes until they burned, searching for a shape. At 500 yards, the faint blue glow of exhaust flames appeared. It was a Messerschmitt Bf-110, the pride of the German night force. The enemy crew was looking forward, searching for Allied bombers. They never imagined a Black Widow was sitting on their 6 o'clock. Ernst aligned the glowing gun sight and felt his heart hammer. He squeezed the trigger, and the 20mm cannons tore the night apart. The Bf-110's left engine became a fountain of fire and debris. The German pilot dived hard, twisting and turning to escape. Ernst followed him down, firing short, lethal bursts into the smoke. They plunged through a thick cloud layer at 3,000 feet. "Pull up, Herman! We're running out of room," Copsel shouted. They broke out of the clouds and saw nothing but the dark ground. The Bf-2110 had vanished, likely crashed, but they couldn't confirm it. They climbed back to 6,000 feet, adrenaline surging through them. "Keep searching, Ed. There's more of them out here," Ernst said. 150 Copsel found another blip, but this one was moving slow. It was crawling at 150 miles per hour, heading toward the lines. Ernst throttled back, careful not to overshoot the slow-moving prey. The silhouette that emerged was an ancient ghost of the 1940 Blitz. It was a Junkers Ru-87 Stuka, a dive bomber from a different era. The Germans were using them for night harassment of the front lines. The Stuka never had a chance against the speed of the P-61. Ernst fired from 500 yards, the shells striking the Stuka's belly. The aircraft exploded instantly in a massive, terrifying fireball. The shockwave rocked the Black Widow as they flew through the debris. Confirmed kill. 2:05 hours. Copsel yelled over the radio. But before Ernst could even level the wings, Copsel had another one, 4 miles ahead. Same profile, same speed. A second Stuka was nearby, likely a wingman to the first. The second German pilot had seen his friend turn into a sun. He dove for the deck, trying to hide in the shadows of the trees. Ernst pushed the nose down, the altimeter spinning at a frantic rate. 1,500 feet. 1,000. Watch the ground, Kopsel warned. The Stuka filled the windscreen, a desperate bird trying to hide. Ernst didn't hesitate, unleashing a final devastating cannon burst. The Ru-87 rolled onto its back and slammed into a Belgian farm. In 7 minutes they had claimed a certain kills and a probable. Ernst pulled the plane into a steep climb, his hands shaking. They had just become the highest-scoring night crew in the theater. With 5 confirmed kills and a V1, they were officially aces. Borrowed Time had lived up to its name and conquered the dark. They landed at Florin just as the first light of dawn appeared. The ground crew stared at the flak holes in the aircraft's tail. It survived their own guns and the best of the Luftwaffe. The debriefing lasted 3 hours as every detail was recorded. The statistics of the 422nd were unlike any other unit in the war. They ended the conflict with 43 confirmed manned aircraft victories. 5 V-1 flying bombs had been swatted out of the sky by their guns. But the cost of those numbers was written in the names of the lost. The P-61 was a pioneer, but its time in the sun was very brief. As the war ended, the age of jet engines was already beginning. The Black Widow was too slow, too complex, and too expensive. Within months of the surrender, the planes were being scrapped. Ernst and Kopsel flew their final missions in May of 1945. The sky was empty. There was nothing left for the radar to find. The enemy they had learned to hunt had simply ceased to exist. The partnership of Borrowed Time was nearing its final chapter. The 422nd was inactivated in September, its mission complete. The men who had fought in the dark were sent back to the light. Ernst stayed in aviation, joining the Tennessee Air National Guard. He built a career in the technology of sound and communications. Kopsel returned to a quiet civilian life, away from the radar scopes. The 2 men who had been as one in the dark went separate ways. But the bond of those nights over Belgium never truly faded. They had shared a secret that no one on the ground could understand. Hermann Ernst lived for 6 more decades after the Great War. He reached the rank of lieutenant colonel before finally retiring. He was inducted into the gathering of Eagle's Hall of Honor. His citation listed the kills, but it couldn't list the courage. The radar operator, Edward Kopsel, remained a shadow in the history. Radar men were the unsung heroes of the night fighter squadrons. Without his eyes, the pilot was just a man lost in a black room. Together, they were a single organism, a predator of the night. Today, the P-61 Black Widow is a ghost in the world of museums. Only for complete aircraft still exist out of the hundreds built. Borrowed Time was melted down into refrigerators and car parts. The physical plane is gone, but the legend remains indestructible. The 422nd lives on today as a test squadron at Nellis Air Force Base. Modern pilots fly jets that the men of 1945 couldn't even imagine. But the heritage of hunting in the dark began with the Black Widow. It began with men who trusted a green screen more than their eyes. If you find value in these forgotten stories, please hit the like button. Every like helps YouTube share this history with a new generation. We're rescuing these tales from the dusty archives every single day. Your support keeps the memory of men like Hermann Ernst alive. Please subscribe and turn on the notifications for our channel. We feature the stories of the brave, the bold, and the borrowed. Real people who faced impossible odds and came back to tell it. Don't let these moments of heroism disappear into the silence. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you are watching from. Are you in the United States, the United Kingdom, or perhaps Germany? Our community of history lovers stretches across the entire globe. Tell us if you have a family member who served in the Air Force. We read every single comment and appreciate your global presence. You aren't just a viewer. You are a guardian of this history. When you share these videos, you are helping us teach the world. Tell us your location and let's see how far this story travels. Think about the trust it took to fly into that total blackness. Two men who had already cheated death once, doing it again.
Right.
They didn't have GPS, they didn't have satellites or night vision. They had vacuum tubes, a radio beam, and absolute brotherhood. The story of Ernst and Kopsel is a story of human adaptation. They took the trauma of their past crashes and turned it into steel. They didn't let the fear of the dark stop them from flying. They owned the night when everyone else was hiding in the light. The Battle of the Bulge was a test of the American spirit. In the freezing cold of Belgium, these crews never gave up. They kept the Black Widows flying when the oil was turning to ice. It protected the boys in the foxholes from the bombs above. Every victory they achieved was a victory for the ground troops. When a Ru IT-8 went down in flames, a fuel depot was saved. When a Stuka was destroyed, a column of soldiers was spared. The night fighters were the silent guardians of the Allied advance. Take a moment to imagine being in Kopsel's rear compartment. Isolated from the pilot, unable to see anything but the radar, knowing that if the pilot makes one mistake, you both are dead. That is the definition of borrowed time and ultimate faith. Hermann Ernst was a master of the technical side of the war. His post-war career in sound was a natural extension of his flight. He understood how waves move through the air and the void. He was a man who lived his life in the frequencies of the world. We owe it to these men to remember their specific names. Hermann Ernst, Edward Kopsel, crew of the 422nd. They aren't just names in a ledger or numbers in a report. They were young men who gave their youth to the night sky. The Black Widow was painted black for a very specific reason. It was designed to disappear, to be an invisible killer in the sky. But we shouldn't let the men who flew it disappear as well. Their legacy is written in the freedom of the skies we fly today. Think of the adrenaline of that 7-minute double kill in March, the heat of the cannons, the smell of cordite in the cockpit, the terrifying sight of the ground rushing up in the dark. That was the reality of the 422nd Night Fighter Squadron. We are dedicated to bringing you the most accurate history possible. From the technical specs of the SCR-7202, the hearts of the pilots, this is where the past comes alive for the modern world. Thank you for being a part of this journey into the archives. If you haven't already, check out our other videos on World War II. We cover the tanks, the ships, and the men who changed everything. Every story is a piece of the puzzle of our modern world. The bravery of Ernst and Kopsel is just the beginning. Remember the name painted on the nose, borrowed time. It is a reminder to all of us that every moment is a gift. They made their borrowed time count for something eternal. They turned a second chance into a legacy of absolute victory. As the sun sets today, look up at the darkening sky above. Imagine the sound of twin R2800 engines thundering through the clouds. Somewhere in the stars, the ghosts of the Black Widows still fly. The hunters are still watching, guarding the world from the dark. Thank you for your likes, your comments, and your subscriptions. You are the reason we can continue to tell these forgotten stories. Hermann Ernst and Edward Kopsel will never be forgotten here. We will see you in the next deep dive into history's vault. Till then, keep the memory of the 422nd alive in your heart. Fly straight, stay on the vector, and watch your radar scope. This has been the incredible true story of the borrowed time. Signing off from the archives, we will see you very soon.